Hello guys, Termex here with another Borderlands 4 video, and today we're looking at Blue Tree Harlowe. Now some things before we get into this so you have realistic expectations. This is probably Harlowe's weakest skill tree in the entire game, and I don't say this because I haven't lacked the amount of knowledge on the skill tree. I've been playing Harlowe since the game came out. I am now Ultimate Vault Hunter level 5, and the skill tree definitely falls off once you hit a certain point. So if you guys want to stick around for when I do the bossing Harlowe build, which I'm getting to work on as we make this video, and I'm going to move on to that, make sure to like and subscribe. Stick around for that. But for this, I would argue this is Harlowe's best mobbing build in the entire game. If you're doing any map content on this screen, this build is amazing. The hordes of enemies you benefit from, you're slamming enemies into walls, all that kind of stuff, you are doing amazing damage. When this build fails and when it falls off is when you go to single target bossing, and then the build just kind of becomes not useless, but you're more of a shell of your weapon than you are your Vault Hunter, because you could just get a few of the gun damage benefits, but you're not able to pick up the bosses, you know what I mean? You can't just slam them into walls. Now, if you guys want to follow along with the written version of this build and you don't want to come back to this video and scroll through it every time you have a question about anything, check out the link in the description and comments down below for the written version of this build, which is on Mobalytics. Very useful tool that I use for all my builds, and I'm going to try to normalize putting them there so people don't have to transition back into my videos when you have a question about something. But what is the star of the show? Well, like I said before, when it comes to mobbing, use the guns you want. What I've seen is the plasma coil, because it does shock and radiation. This gun was almost made for Harlowe in a way. Beams on the Vladoff, all those underbarrel attachments are very overpowered right now, but it's for a short duration. We do not know if that's intentional, if it's going to get nerfed soon, but for now I wouldn't rely too heavily on it and find the guns you actually like to use. The Anarchy is also another great option. I do have the version with the torque stickies, which you would think is kind of counterintuitive, but you're going to empty out an Anarchy anyway to gain stacks, so might as well turn it into torque stickies. It turns out to be pretty damn good, but it's not needed. Any version of the Anarchy is pretty powerful at this point. The rep kit is nothing too special. It is the war paints, so when we use it we gain fire rate and movement speed, and every time we get damaged we actually get our rep kit faster, and mine rolled with leech for the lifesteal. This is something you could get, or if you're doing harder hitting enemies, I don't have it on my character right now, hold on, or if you have harder hitting enemies, you could also use another rep kit with amped, which is very good. On your next shot you'll get 200% damage. Another one that I do use if you want to use that in tandem with shotguns, in tandem with sniper rifles, anything of the sort. Torque stickies, so the first shot or two does bonus damage. That definitely works, especially if you have these ×10 torque stickies, because these are very nice with the bonus amp, and you can just lay into big tanky enemies and get a good amount of damage onto them. For the ordnance, we do have a few options. I like to do anything cryo. The rain band is very nice. Mine rolled with Merv, so it has even more AoE and splash because it pertains to the build, and that's what we're rocking with. Another thing I would recommend, and a lot of people have been farming it from the one guy, you may have seen all the videos on YouTube like fastest legendary or XP farm, is going to be the jelly grenade. Jelly grenade is nice, has a bunch of charges, has a very high cryo efficiency, and very good for Harlowe. I have one in radiation that I use sometimes if I want to proc my radiation buffs, and I have one in cryo because I get a bunch of cryo benefits with this build that you're going to want to use cryo as much as possible, but don't feel like you're too locked into it. And honestly, I'm going to be so real when it comes to weapon balancing. At UVHM 5, a lot of guns feel super useless, and that's another topic for another video I will get into. Going to our class mod, we are using the Skeptic. Why the Skeptic? Well, the Skeptic, every time we slam an enemy that is in stasis, which is with our ability, it will automatically launch radiation darts and cryo darts that home in on nearby enemies, and this will just spread more radiation, more cryo, more AoE, and then if we shoot an enemy with a active status effect, we get action skill cooldown. We get stasis damage by 45% with this class mod, and we get action skill duration. Action skill duration is huge to maintain our uptime and keep that bubble bouncing around the map as much as possible. The Super Soldier is another shield that I was sleeping on, and then I finally farmed it, and I understand why. When we get our full shields, we get a 25% movement speed and fire rate buff, and we also get ammo regen. Now, why is that important? Because if our energy shield is full, when we're using ordnance like the rain band, which is semi-slow firing, if I pull it out and I shoot it, you can see the ammo in the bottom of my screen, 5 to 6, 6, 5. This is me spamming it. It's almost like the Butcher Pearlescent from Borderlands 2. As long as that buff is maintained and you're not really getting hit, I can kind of just shoot my ordnance as long as I pace myself without throwing it on cooldown. And if you just want to run around for a second, slide, get some ammo back, hide behind cover, make sure your shield's still full, and you could just keep doing it over and over again. The Super Soldier allows you to do this with many different items, not just, this ordnance, but a lot of different ordnance. And if you're using something like torque stickies, you can see when we shoot, we get that ammo regen in the bottom right, so we could stack up more and more torque stickies, lay into somebody, and then finally hit hit them with that reload at the end and do a bunch of damage on the more tankier targets. Now, the enhancement, I actually have Jacob license part increase the number of possible ricochets because of the torque stickies over here. I want it to be able to bounce once again. I do wish the alt fire on here wasn't Atlas, but we don't talk about that. A lot of times 10 torque sticky Jacobs are just hard to come by, so I'm kind of working with what I got here. For the rolls, SMG magazine size, which is good for our plasma coil, shotgun magazine size for our torque stickies for more damage, and gun critical hit damage by 50%. Increasing our crit all around the board is going to be very nice. Plus, when we're using our alt fire beam tosser that just does insane damage on big targets, it will also increase the damage on that when we do crit. Going into the skill tree is pretty straightforward here. Based on our class mod, we actually have points into Bright Future's fire rate, so we don't have to spec into that. We have points into Indiscreet Math, which increases our splash damage, so we don't have to spec into that. But what's actually really good is we have a point into Stun Lock. We don't want to go into the left tree too much with this build, but with this class mod, it allows us to get this without being spec'd into it. When we critically hit an enemy, we put them into stasis. When we shoot someone in the head or in their crit spot, they will float with that rainbow bubble and be up there for 5 seconds. It does have a cooldown when you could use it again, but this is really nice. When you're on cooldown, there's a badass in the room with a rocket launcher and you just want to shoot him and get him out of the fight for a second. Really damn powerful. Other than that, going into our augments, the first augment is inertia, so when we kill somebody in our bubble, it doesn't reset. It just goes to a new enemy, locks onto that enemy, and does a bunch of damage, and allows us to chain from enemy to enemy to enemy and keep the most uptime on our ability as possible. For the capstone, we just went with the Singularity Cryo Explosion on Slam. I know some people are going to say for a Slam build, why don't just take this? Well, in my experience, you cannot guide this capstone. Wherever the enemy is where they have to slam up and down until the ability is over, meaning you can't direct it into a wall, you can't direct it to where the enemies are at. Overall, it's just very unreliable and not something I would use. The other capstone, once again, we don't need to put multiple people into stasis because we're just chaining it anyway, so you might as well get the Cryo Explosion. So when we deal our cryo damage, we can proc a bunch of different perks like our life steal into overshield when we deal cryo, a chance to freeze enemies with our action skill, bonus damage to anyone that has a cryo status effect. We have a kill skill that just increases cryo damage from all sources. Cryo damage skill, you could see where all the cryo damage is coming from, and so does elemental damage. Elemental damage also goes into our cryo damage. For the red tree, we just simply went for the action skill damage and the elemental damage because once again, that is what the build is centric towards. Green tree, we went with the overshield capacity and shield capacity for survivability because when we irradiate an enemy, we gain gun damage, and this stacks up to 12 times for 120% gun damage. This is when you irradiate an enemy, not when you shoot an enemy with radiation. So you need a bunch of enemies in the room, and we need a way of irradiating a bunch of enemies in the room. And how do we do that? Well, the class mod from earlier that shoots those radiation darts is going to be the first step in that. Or if you want to use a radiation jelly, like we talked about earlier, and throw it in a room, all those enemies are going to get radiation procs. So there's multiple ways of you proccing that as well. In our last 3 points, we put into creative overflow, bonus gun damage based on our amount of overshield. So overshield's gonna be super easy. When we deal cryo damage, we get life steal, and if our health is full, we get overshield steal, which is going to be very easy because we're just slamming things with our cryo anyway. And you'll see throughout the video in the clips that it's up at all times. The specialization tree is kind of hectic, so let me break it down in the most simplest way possible. Just know none of this stuff is needed to make this build good, but of course it's going to help. The perks that we are going to be selecting are going to be a honed mind. Action skill can have a chance to critically hit. It's only a 5% chance, but when your slam critically hits with the bubble, it does some pretty nice damage, especially with that 50% bonus that it also provides. Full spectrum arsenal just gives us ordnance damage based on our bonus gun damage, because as you've seen, we do have a bunch of bonus gun damage in our skill tree, even though this is not an ordnance build, just something I would recommend. If you don't want to do the ordnance, I would actually go over into bullet train. You could hit fire while sprinting and you gain gun damage while walking. So if you just wanted to do a full-on gun damage build, you could definitely take that path. But I am a devil. This is going to be one of the main contenders and main power spikes for Harlowe's blue tree, is your action skill damage now benefits from increases to your gun damage by 50%. So that one skill where we irradiate enemies and it stacks up to 120%, that is giving our slam bubble 60% bonus damage just from that skill alone. And we have a bunch of other gun damage skills that will be benefiting it. And the final one, when we shoot an enemy, we get 1% gun damage per stack up to 50. Think of this as a free 50% gun damage, or in other terms, this is like the pearl of knowledge from Borderlands 3. If you keep shooting an enemy with a bunch of pellets, you get passive, damage. And it's not too bad, but it does help a lot. As for enhancements, we only have one here, which is cooldown rate, that I specifically put into my grenade. I needed more cooldown rate on the build because the down downtime is probably this build's biggest downfall. When your abilities are down, you kind of just feel like you're waiting for your action skill, which once again is just kind of a issue that dwindles down to Blue Tree specifically, which hopefully isn't going to be that big of a problem when I move on to other builds. But that is the video, guys. That is AoE clear the whole map Harlowe. Honestly, really fun, but I do wish that there was better options for bossing. I'm going to be completely honest. If this build wants to be capable of bossing, it's going to need a already strong weapon that is a quote-unquote meta weapon that people are going to be using to the point where, oh, any build could really use this kind of gun. Because in my experience, in my 60 hours so far, I might update this build in the future when DLC gets returned and stuff like that, but I don't see a way for you to use your bubble in a bossing scenario that isn't just using underbarrels and spamming underbarrels and waiting for the cooldowns, which I don't think is a build. It's just exploiting something that may be nerfed here soon. But if you want to stick around for my other Harlowe builds, because she's going to be my only Vault Hunter I'm going to be playing, make sure you like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a comment, push the video out to more people in the Borderlands 4 community. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. You guys have a terrific day, stay safe, and I'll see you guys later.